Hello, hello. This is Tammy Brunk, Earth Sky Woman, and I am here with you today to speak into this Capricorn full moon. It is exact on July 10th at 3:37 p.m. However, the energies around this full moon and everything I'm going to be talking about is really amplified over the coming days and weeks, even some of what I'm going to talk about today for the coming years. So, if you're listening a little bit later, it's still quite relevant for now. Okay, so I'm going to just begin by saying that, well, I want to share the chart so we can look at what's going on in a bigger field and begin with that Capricorn moon and then go from there. Okay, so what really strikes me about this Capricorn moon, and we've got the sun here, we've got the moon here at about 1850 Cancer, the sun, and 1850 Capricorn, the moon. And we have it's the first full moon in Capricorn since Pluto, see that right here, since Pluto moved into Aquarius. So one of the first pieces that comes through for me is that this is actually, in a sense, a kind of a moment of celebration. So for me, this full moon feels like a moment to acknowledge, to celebrate, to really pay attention to the ways in your own life and in your field, in your world, that you have been seeing a composting. You have been seeing the death birthing energetics around the old frequencies and form of Capricorn. So what am I talking about with all that? Okay, so basically what I'm referring to is that the sign of Capricorn is a sign that has to do with culture and how we create culture. It has to do with really the deepest programming and how it is that we be in community, how it is that we take care of each other or not. It has to do with the rules and the guidelines of how we collectively, as a society in any given moment, how we tend to, what the dominant narrative is around how it is to, how should we be? What's the kind of consensus reality that we've agreed upon? So so Capricorn carries culture is another way to say it. It's kind of like tofu. I say this sometimes. It's kind of silly, but it gets the point across. Capricorn in and of itself is, again, like I said, it carries culture. So it's going to carry forward whatever the dominant consensus reality is around the rules, the structure, the guidelines, the contracts that we have with each other as humanity, even to the level of saying, who are we? Like, who are we as a species? And what does it mean to be a nation, a group, a community that expresses human qualities in a beneficent way, in the right way, as it were? And so you can see it's the institutions of human society are carry that frequency of whatever the general framework for Capricorn, or again, it's like the rules we play by, right? Like the general consensus. These are the rules we play by. So I'm speaking about all this right now because it's Capricorn full moon. But the celebration piece, what I'm referring to is that from about 2008 until this last November, interesting timing, we had Pluto in the sign of Capricorn. And whatever sign Pluto's moving through, it represents something in the collective zeitgeist, in the collective consciousness that is going through a massive deathing, birthing portal. It's going through an incredibly potent composting process. And if you know anything about composting, if it's done well, um, you're going to start out with this kind of, you're going to start out with something, kind of this massive organic matter. And then if it's accomplished in a good way, then when you're complete with it, then it looks nothing like what it began as. You've got your apple peels, you've got your carrots, you've got all these things in the compost. But when it's fully composted, instead of being all these different separate parts, it's going to be something broken down, and it's going to be something where the nutrients, the vital nutrients, minerals, organic matter of those components, can then be usable to grow something new, right? So if you look at the full life cycle, it's a process of decadence. There's a process of decay that happens that we don't often celebrate in our reality, but we need to because this is a beautiful way that the organic realm works, where things are cycled. They go through cycles. Um, so something to know about the Pluto and Capricorn cycle is that it only happens every 200 and almost about 250 years. And so this is a very rare occurrence. And so this is one of so many indicators that we've come to recognize now as the turning of an age, or the great turning, as one of an eco elder I love, Joanna Macy, would refer to it. And so just this understanding, we are living through a larger cycle of time where everything is, I love the phrase that we are collectively midwifing one form of society, one way of being. And I'm sorry, we're hospicing that old age, and we are midwifing a new age, right? A new way of being as a society. So, so we have been in a process of this breakdown of cultural norms and the right way to do things and consensus reality in terms of what kinds of institutions, what kinds of structures it takes to care for the people. And even, our ideas about um, how we construct society and how we construct even the global kind of reality of nation states, all of that. So there's a lot in terms of power structures that have been broken down. They are in process of breakdown, um, and so that doesn't just happen outside of us. That is actually happening as well inside of us. And so basically, if we look at our own lives, when I talk about celebrating, I know some of you are out there are like, what are you talking about? How can we possibly be celebrating? Well, um, I would encourage you, challenge you even, to consider from 2008 until now. And this isn't everyone. Let me just say this. It's not like everybody is waking up in the same way all at the same time. It's not like all of the sudden our medical system or our educational system or the way we think about health or the way we care for each other, all of that has just broken down in such a wonderful, neat way that that it appears that we're beginning this beautiful new garden and it feels great. Right? At least that's not the story we're told. So on the surface, what it looks like is that these systems that have not been working well are kind of crumbling around us, and that this is a horrific thing, and that we need to fight that, and we need to resist that on every level. And oh my gosh, what I would say about that is that there is a lot that's happening under the surface that we want to begin to pay attention to. And when I say that, what I mean is that, yes, all across the globe, we are seeing very disturbing trends in terms of the politics, in terms of this kind of, what I would say is it's a continuation of coming to the surface of what has been out of balance and what has been distorted now for quite some time. And so we are continuing to see it, and we are continuing to see it accelerate. And so this is very uncomfortable, and many are waking up to atrocities, to systems of injustice, all of these things for the first time on a level that we haven't before. Um, and so basically, when I say celebrate, it goes against everything many might think. If you are really tuned into the news and you're really tuned into one narrative, and you're not feeling and seeing the bigger currents. But what I would encourage is that everyone actually take time to spend more than normal outside, walking out on the land, barefoot if possible, going out under the stars at night, spending time with the moon, spending time with the trees, spending a bit more time with your elderly neighbor or your 2-year-old nephew, or with the forces of life, the parts of reality that are very kind of um, connected to the heart, I would say, and connected to the simpler pleasures of life. And the reason I would say that is because when you start to spend time in that more slowed down way, where your whole body, your whole self is kind of listening, what you're going to actually feel is an undercurrent of excitement and possibility. Now, I say that understanding that you may not feel it at first. A lot of times, what happens, especially if, many of us, and very much compassion for this, many people, because of the way that economies are shifting, I'll say here in the US, I'm sure it's different everywhere, but there's a lot of tightness, a lot of contraction, a lot of fear, and a lot of stress. Because the way we've constructed our reality and our society here, and as a model for the rest of the world, there are a lot of beautiful things about what we do and have done. And there is also a very massive distortion that is being dismantled and has been more and more dismantled already all across the globe that would indicate that our value and our worth have to do with um, how hard we can work, how much we can produce, all of these outer kind of um, barometers of success. Now, when I say that, I'm not actually in any way diminishing that it's really beneficial and wonderful, maybe even more so at this moment, to look at what your goals are and your dreams and really pour energy, focus, time, and attention on those dreams and visions. I think that's hugely important. What I'm speaking to more is where that the motivation comes from something outside of ourselves, like the belief that we are inherently flawed, there's something wrong with us, and we need to prove ourselves. When the motivation comes from that place, or when that motivation comes from more of a sense of scarcity and fear that there's not enough, um, that way of doing things isn't sustainable anymore. It's simply not. And we feel it and we see it everywhere. There's a tremendous pressure now to become authentic and to really ask what in my life is stale and outgrown and needs to be composted, and what in my life is emerging right now that's new and that feels fresh and alive, that might feel very scary to follow, but that's where the energy is. So, okay, so Capricorn full moon. This is the first Capricorn full moon since Pluto moved out of Capricorn. And so to me, it's a celebration of what are all the ways that you in your life have actually allowed and so beautifully been letting go of old beliefs and old patterns and old ways of being that kept you even more on a hamster wheel and that caused you to not be paying attention to what really matters in your life, right? And so, I see this, it feels like another iteration of 2020 for a lot of people. And so I see many people right now kind of deepening their spiritual practice. I have a friend, a dear friend, who's a mother, and her husband was laid off, and they're going through a lot of stress. She just lost a sister-in-law, and has been through a tremendous amount. And I just spoke to her last week, and she was like, "You'll never believe what I just did." She had not long ago she had joined a local sangha and a local community, a Buddhist kind of practice community. And last weekend, she had found a place in Missouri. She lives in St. Louis, and she had found a place, a little retreat center, an hour away. That was as phenomenal. She said it was like another reality. It was like I stepped into a portal into another world, this beautiful Buddhist temple in, rural Missouri. And she did a retreat there. She did a meditation retreat, and she hadn't expected it. It just kind of came to her. And this is a really big deal for her as someone who's been raising these young children and really and caring for her mother who's getting older and her sister-in-law. I mean, she is like Cancer moon, really nourishing her family in very stressful times. And so she was just kind of blown away. Like, how did this happen? I just got pulled into this, and all of a sudden, I've got this new kind of orientation to what's happening in the world and this new practice. And it was just like I stepped out of one reality and into another. So want you to notice a couple things about that. This is a friend who is really steeped in middle America, in the middle of a city, taking care of her kids. They go to school, they have like a ordinary life, although I always know my friend to be a profound mystic and devotional seeker, and she's actually playing it out as a mother and a wife and a community member and a daughter, and which I think is actually the most badass thing in the world. Not to compare, because there's a lot of ways to be badass and a lot of ways to honor that, but I always will honor that to be that, to have that spiritual path of the mother needs to be deeply honored. So in any case, that's happening for her. It's happening for people I talk to all the time. and one of the tells, one of the things that actually I would encourage you to celebrate, even though it sounds strange, is if you feel a little bit almost bored or kind of listless, like, I don't even know what's next. Like, I don't get it. I used to have all this ambition. I was doing a reading for a woman yesterday. I've been doing a lot of readings for Capricorn ascendant people. And I was just laughing with her because it was just like, where's the motivation? Like, where is it? And and it's just because everything's reorganizing on the inside out. That composting process, yes, it's over, but a lot of the ramifications of that are still kind of sorting. And this year is such a big year because so between November of last year and October of this next year, we will have all of the planets changing signs. And I include even Mars and Venus beginning new cycles. And that's unprecedented. Like as so far as like, I don't know when the last time was that happened. And it's extraordinary. And it really indicates there's a tremendous amount of accelerated change happening right now that we are all the part of. We are all part of. It's bigger than us. And so with all of that, there's a lot of movement, a lot of shifting and changing happening. I would go so far as to um, say that I will just say in my belief system, all the changes are for us, that all the changes are taking us into a time of greater unity consciousness, greater healing these patterns of violence and war, that we are coming to the other side of this very dark time. And when I say dark, I really, I think that we have begun to see how dark it really has been for quite some time. But that darkness or that difficulty, at least for some of us who are in the US or in the developing world, we may not have necessarily experienced or felt that so viscerally. We might have been a little bit asleep to it. I'll just give the example that when in 2014, the last time that there was this massive that there was a conflict between Israel and Gaza, and thousands of Gazans were killed. There was almost no visibility to that. Most people didn't know what was happening to Palestinians in the West Bank or in Gaza. And this is where I want to say, let's celebrate. As horrific as what is happening, it is a very strange word to use, but I want to use it because I want to actually celebrate the people of Palestine um, for the these are difficult things to talk about, but I want to celebrate the ways that so many people across the globe now are seeing and perceiving of what has been happening in slow motion in the West Bank and in Gaza for a very long time. Now, I want us to celebrate the places where we as a collective are seeing what has been hidden. And it grieves me greatly that it would take this to wake us up. And I understand, even as I say this, that there is a tremendous amount of grief that we also move through in waves. And so as I'm speaking to you today, I'm very deliberately focusing on a frequency that is of alchemizing and transmuting even some of these very, do not misunderstand me, heartbreaking and rage-inducing patterns that have been awake and alive on planet Earth now for far too long. But what I want to say is that I want to celebrate that the world is waking up to what's happening. And the same with detention centers, the same with what I want to name here in the US is that there is a lot as horrific and as heartbreaking. And again, I am currently, as I speak to you, in a frequency of having done a tremendous amount of work to face, feel, experience the reality of what's happening in our country so far as immigration goes, so far as the detention centers that have been built, all of this. Um, these things feel very important to speak to, um, and that we are all feeling it. This is the thing, we are all connected. And so I want to speak about all of this in a way that is really clear. Yes, it's coming more from my whole body. It's not just coming from the part of me that feels victimized by it. Because here's something, I refuse to tell the story of now from the lens of we are victims and we are losing this fight, because I feel that that is an accurate perception. So in any case, what I'm sharing about, which may be controversial, but what I'm sharing about Israel and Palestine is that my sense is that what's been going on for a very long time has been accelerated. And my sense also is that the global awakening around what's happening and the witnessing, as that this is taking us and will continue to take us into a place of shifting what's happening there. That is a very strong thing to say. And but my sense is that this awakening is essential. Um, and what's happening in the US in terms of detention centers and with immigrants, again, is something that has been happening, but it's been accelerated. What also has been happening in the US that hasn't been often seen is what's happened with our private prison systems. And this is also of the same, it's another iteration of something that's been happening for a long time, where these privatized prisons and detention centers, which do operate much like concentration camps, I'll be very honest about that, um, that they are they're an aberration, and that these systems have been hidden. People haven't seen what has happened to young African American men in this country. They haven't seen the cost of privatized prisons. They haven't understood the larger um, systems of injustice that are being furthered and deepened through these processes. So, as weird as it might say to use this full moon to acknowledge what's breaking down, what I would say is breaking down is actually that these systems of power that have been more hidden, except to a very few activists or people who know what's going on, there's something now that's happening where more and more people are saying, no, that's absolutely not okay. And people are saying, no, that is not the world that I will help to feed and nourish and bring into being. There are different realities that we want to bring into our reality, and that we say no more. And so there are a lot of ways to affect change. And one of them is, first of all, I would just say, I think it is sometimes a tricky place where we try to figure out, and we're all different, right? We all go through different phases with all of this. But if we allow all of our attention to be captured by, for example, these two themes that are very alive in the news, because, for good reason, and we are living through all of this, and it is very important to be aware of it. However, if we just live there, then we're not creating something new. And I'm going to repeat again what I heard in a small gathering of Indigenous wisdom keepers and climate guardians recently. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again because to me it feels like it's what's really accurate. That when we see what's playing out in the world around us right now, what we're basically seeing is that this birthing this birthing of a new human, of a new society, of a new earth, all the different ways we want to talk about it, it's happening. It is unfolding. It is in process. And yet, as is often the case, when there's massive growth, there's also fear around the growth. There's resistance around the growth. There's kind of a kickback that happens. This is what always happens. And even when you give birth, there's contractions, right? So, what's happening is that there's all of this resistance to change that is occurring because it's happening very fast and people are afraid. And so one could say there are also our systems of power that are clamping down, that are trying to maintain their power, trying to interrupt this birthing process. However, if you look at the astrology, well, okay, let me back up for a second. So that's what's happening. The birthing is happening. There are forces that are attempting to disrupt and interrupt the process of the birth of our new reality. And there are narratives and storylines that we have been kind of programmed with that would say that that would say this is going to be the end result. This is what's going to happen. This is the future that's going to unfold for us here in the US, across the globe, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what's going to happen. And now sometimes it's kind of like with a dream. You could say we're living through a bit of a nightmare right now. And what will happen with a dream that's very scary and very extreme, my sense of what I've learned about that is that the purpose of a dream that's scary like that, kind of like in the US, what we're living through right now, is the reason it's so loud is actually because it's trying to get our attention and it's trying to show us something so that in our waking life, we can make choices that are actually more subtle to avert that potential outcome, right? So I think where we're at right now is this very interesting time where, yes, it's so noisy. So we want to pay attention to each one of us individually in our way. Like, what am I being shown to do in my life, in my world, with my capacities, with my skills? And how is it that if I can pay attention to this scary thing, but then turn towards what's generative, that I can be a part of averting that and doing something, making something happen that's very different. But you don't want to just keep looking at the terrible dream and saying, oh my God, this terrible thing's going to happen. Oh my God, this thing's going to happen, and making it bigger and focusing on it. That's not the way to heal the potential future timeline. It is to pay enough attention to it that it gets your attention, and then to allow our lives individually and thus collectively to shift and change. So change is wanted. Change is wanted for each one of us individually and for those of us all of us collectively. And my sense is that, again, so going back to celebrating with Capricorn, well, we have been seeing and we are seeing what is not working for us. And we also have had, as part of this Pluto and Capricorn cycle, the real powerful emergence. It's like I realized at the end of the cycle, I started realizing it's as if when you complete a big cycle like this, it's not like it just ends and doesn't go anywhere. What happens is it's like you've got the elders in the room with you now. And when I refer to the elders, it means that embodied, kind of matured energy or frequency or way of being that was cultivated over the course of the cycle is now standing with you, is now standing present within you. And so now it's time to call on it. So in the case of Capricorn, Pluto and Capricorn, what that is awoken within us and in our larger reality. And let me be clear, it doesn't have to be everybody that's waking up in the way we want them to. It only needs to be a certain percentage of people where we kind of maintain our path forward in a good way. So now it's like the Capricorn elder, this initiated Capricorn elder who has gone through the dark night of the soul and come out of it, um, maybe with some scars and maybe with a humble heart, a more humble heart, is maybe not quite as ambitious as they were before. Like I'm speaking about all of us or even our world, like where we're at. It might be that we don't feel it's not quite as black and white in terms of how we structure our time, how we build our businesses, how we make money, how all these Capricorn things, how we use our energy, all those things. It's not like we're just doing business as usual. That does not work because it's been composted, because we have been remade. And so it's unmooring. So we actually celebrate the places where we feel unmoored, the places where we feel like I don't know, like I can't do it the old way, because something new is emerging. So with this Capricorn full moon, I just want to honor that. And just to say, to me, it does feel like we are in a profound transformational process. And there is a lot of beauty emerging from this. But as I've mentioned before, if you really want to feel it, get up, listen to the warning signals, again, like watch the news to the degree that you need to, or, to see the story playing out, and then really ask, get quiet, turn within, take space for meditation, take space to really listen and take walks outside and really listen, spirit, what are you showing me? What is my place in all of this? And really listen, and really, there are a number of spiritual seekers or spiritual guides or mentors that I love who really have been reiterating this idea that now is the time where we want to be in continual communion with spirit, with source, just really connected to divinity. And, from the Aquarian perspective, that might feel like our higher self. It might feel like the quantum self. It might feel like the unified field. But there is also, I feel still also a way that it's like I'm connected to spirit. And again, what's that Capricorn elder in the room? Well, I feel part of that is that we have really, since November, we've been losing a lot of elders. We have been seeing many of our elders coming close to the threshold of dying. And many of us have been listening far more to our elders. And when I say that, I mean, like for example, my mom, she's 84 this year. And she is, I've spent a tremendous amount of time with her this year and just been seeing and feeling just this deep wisdom that she has accumulated in her life from having supported very literally in the caretaking of her husband, my dad, when he passed, of her own mother, of her own father, of my dad's mother and father, and participation as well in the crossing over of my brother. So she has been deeply engaged in all those processes, as well as birthing 9 children. And she has, and this isn't true of everyone, but I have seen her soften. I've seen her light get brighter. I've felt her heart become more humble. And it's very clear that the light that shines through her being is translucent. It is enormous. And so I think we're learning to see the light that shines through the individuals who have lived lives that were in deep service. Um, and there are a lot of ways to do that. So, it's not just those who have been mothers. I want to deeply honor all of you out there who don't have children. I want to deeply honor all of you who, like me, have chosen a very different path because so far as we go, and many of us actually have Capricorn ascendants, or like my case, a lot of Capricorn 10th house. And what's really important to realize is that we came here to do it differently. So much of our lives, often we've been trying to figure out how to do it the way other people do it because we want to be effective. We want to know how to use time, energy, resources well. Um, However, because Capricorn's been set through such a massive composting, it's important for us to acknowledge that it's not going to look the same. And sometimes it's important to look, for example, for as women, look at our moon, look at our Venus, for example, look at our sun and say, well, how does that contribute to a new version of Capricorn? As men, we might look at Mars, moon, and sun and say, well, how does that contribute to a new Capricorn? I'm saying this for people who have Capricorn and any strong position that's not the moon, like it's your new territory. Um, and so, for me, my moon is in Gemini, my Venus is in Sagittarius, my sun is in Sagittarius, and I have Capricorn, midheaven, north node, and Jupiter. So lots of that in the 10th house. So, a lot of times I feel this kind of almost societal 10th house Capricorn pressure, like I need to succeed in this way. However, my way of doing Capricorn needs to be honoring and in right relationship with Gemini, meaning that my way of working with time, energy, resources, it has to integrate a certain element of freedom and doing it in a way that feels good to me, feels playful, feels more light. It has to honor Sagittarius, and that Sagittarius has a lot of Neptune in it as well. And so it's more the mystic, so all this Capricorn has to also be balanced with my mystical path. I have Mars in Scorpio. So also that Capricorn has to be willing to go through a lot of processes of death and rebirth and letting go when that's required. So you can kind of see where I'm not going to be that person. And sometimes I feel like, oh, I missed it. I didn't buy a house. I didn't, but no, because we who are here with progressive Capricorn are actually here to show the world that we can be wildly successful, that we can be deeply resourced, that we can be profoundly capable, that we can make life work in very different ways than what it used to look like. So I would say just celebrate as well all the ways we are learning to do life differently. Celebrate the ways you're learning to make money differently. Celebrate the ways you're opening up to how you use time differently. I'll give an example also for myself, which is because I've created a business for myself where I've had these cycles of being really focused for years, 10 years, writing a newsletter every week with, in-depth astrological information. And then, I know where Saturn's moving through my chart. And I know that I've had this kind of culmination point, and then it started going into the 12th house, et cetera, et cetera. And so I know my cycles and I know I've done a tremendous amount of work. So the last few years, I've let myself be in more of a phase of kind of just, I don't want to say it's not, it's just, it hasn't been as full on, full out. And I've let myself do that. But what's funny is that I sometimes think, oh my gosh, like I should be more full on. I should be like, really like, um, just 1,000% into this business model, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not saying that I won't pick more of that up now that Saturn's in my first house, because that Capricorn is always a big thing for me. However, what I want to get to is that I actually am profoundly lucky because I can do this work and I can live well. And I don't like when I see all these emails like, are you hustling? I don't hustle. And I don't, more and more, I really allow it to flow and I live well and I live simply. And my beautiful practice, my business nourishes me. And it's taken a long time to dismantle the part of me that was such a workaholic and that was in my 30s who was trying to juggle freelance writing, environmental writing work, navigating being the associate or the developmental director for a nonprofit, starting another community organization, helping to, from a distance, support a permaculture farm in the West Bank. Um, and at the same time, I was starting up my astrology practice. So when other people were raising their children, that's what I was doing. And it almost made me sick, and I think that so I see a lot of people around me who are still in that model of pushing on that level. And I have deep compassion and I understand there are cycles of life that are more full out. But I have to remind myself this isn't a failure because you have more time than most. This isn't a failure that you've actually designed your life such that you know that you need more time for meditation, for prayer, for walking, for even at this stage, I'm opening up to more of the capacity to just be an auntie, right? To help to organize a work party for my mom or help to support with a camping trip and a canoeing trip with my godchild and my sisters. So and this is right this moment, right? Because this is summer. I'm close to my mom who's aging. But then, maybe next month that I go to Greece. So, I'm finding actually a balance between different parts of my life. And a lot of us are learning to do that, instead of these very narrow parameters, 10,000 a month or, 200K a year. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I'm down. But, that doesn't just come out of nowhere. What we are desiring is a well-designed, crafted life to live well, to design our lives with our time, energy, resources in such a way that it nourishes us deeply. And that takes us to the Cancer moon. I'm sorry, the Cancer sun, that this Capricorn moon wants to balance the part of us that is, that does know how to balance a budget and or knows how to build our business in the way we want to, that does know how to be that wise elder or that counselor or that person who's there for the members of our community who might be struggling, because there is that kind of almost grandmother or counseling, like wise elder capacity that we want to step into. We want to be present for the people in our community when we are resourced. So we can do that. We can do all those things. And then we also so we balance that, and balance the creative problem solving of how to use our time well with this more, because Capricorn is conscious, Capricorn does have boundaries. Capricorn, even composted Capricorn does have the ability to say no, to the ability to say yes or no, and really gauge, do I have the capacity for this or not? And so with this Capricorn full moon, we're balancing that healthy boundaries, healthy, clear understanding of how much capacity do I have, how much, what can I give, what can I not, being clear, balancing that with this Cancerian mode that can actually Cancer, when we're really flowing with Cancer, we are flowing. Like it's a cardinal sign. So we're in motion, we're active. And so it's often what I notice with it is kind of like these days when I allow myself, see, that's my Saturn in Capricorn. I allow myself to just say, well, here I am in my neighborhood right now, and I don't just have to be building my business. I don't just have to be, um, considering how I might want to save the world. Um, it's also like I think I want to go hang out with this new friend and go down to the creek and swim in the swimming hole and just have a great conversation about life. Um, because that feels nourishing and it feels like building local connections and it feels like being under the sun and in the water, which is very Cancerian. And so Cancer actually often feels really good. Cancer feels good. It's immediate dopamine hits from being with the baby or petting the dog or being with your aging mama and working in the garden. It's immediate feedback. Like Earth says, yes, do this. But of course, it does want to be balanced with Capricorn. And Capricorn is more like, okay, well, I would, I would love to I would actually love to spend the morning with Phoebe, my little 2-year-old, lovely upstairs neighbor. And at the same time, I do know that I need to work on my taxes or I need to work on this video, right? For my practice, for my business to really serve. And yeah, so it's the balancing between those things. So that's part of also bringing it down to the more micro personal and in the collective. It's really that we are collectively finding a way to and it's not just us. It's not just what we're doing consciously. There are much larger forces at work that are underway right now, where that composting process is continuing, and it's so much bigger than who we are. But I just want to also add to that that some of the other things that are happening astrologically right now are we have that are massive. It's very hard to keep up, honestly. Is we have Uranus and Venus. So Venus was with the Pleiades last week. So if you felt that star magic, oh my gosh, there's been so much star magic. The sun has been with Sirius, Venus has been with the Pleiades, and then Uranus is now with the Pleiades at 0 Gemini. That's where Alcyone, that's where the Pleiades constellation is located. So a lot of star wisdom just really pouring in. And so that's happening. Uranus moving into Gemini. I'm going to do a separate video on that in the next couple of days. But that is a sea change. That is a massive shift from Uranus, excuse me, in Taurus to Uranus in Gemini. And part of what it is really helping us lighten and brighten. That's how I'm feeling it. It is a liberatory energy, and we really need that lightening and that brightening. And so all that's happening. And then the other big piece of what's happening that actually also very much relates to the Capricorn celebration I was speaking to is that we have very close to this full moon. If you look at this, you've got Neptune that's already stationed retrograde on July 4th. And then you have Saturn that is preparing to station retrograde on the 12th and 13th, depending on your time zone. And then, so that's happening. And if you can look at this, I don't know if you can count this or not, but it's like 6 degrees or 6 seconds. They're like 6 seconds apart right now. I'm sorry, it's not six, it's 9. It's 14 degrees apart between Saturn and Neptune. So right now, as we're moving in, as Saturn is slowing, we're this weekend and through the coming days, we have this really powerful moment where Saturn and Neptune in the early degrees of Aries are incredibly close, like these massive forces, these two planetary bodies that represent, for Saturn, they represent what I've, in the Saturn course I've been guiding, facilitating. I've been getting these insights. We've all been receiving these beautiful insights in the dreaming around the new emergent expression of Saturn and also ancient Saturn. Who is Saturn in its bones? And I got the message early on that Saturn is guardian of the organic, and as one of the 7 lights, one of the 7 archetypal energies that guides this organic realm. And as the outermost visible planet, Saturn defines boundaries, design, and it's, of course, very much like Capricorn, right? So we've had the Capricorn composting happening for 20 years. And now we have had as well this Saturn dissolution because Neptune dissolves whatever it touches. And so Neptune really since earlier this year, but then also through next summer and beyond, it's really through 2028 that we feel the impact of this. We have, but right now we're in like the heart of it. Um, is this dissolving of Saturn, the old rules of what it means to be in a physical body, to be an organic being, to live on planet Earth. It's dissolving. And so the old guidelines and rules, again, much like Pluto and Capricorn, they're dissolving. Now, what does this mean for us in terms of how we move forward? Well, first of all, if you feel a little bewildered, again, there's that, you're not doing something wrong. I actually feel that what's really essential right now is for us to call on the forces of grace and mercy and unconditional love. This is what I'm talking about when I say it's time for us to feel as if, we're in communion with spirit, with God, with the creator, with great mystery all the time, like talking to spirit, or as it were, you could say source or my higher self, however that feels to you when you're in contact with the numinous. Um, to me, that's because Neptune, which represents grace and mercy and unconditional love and unity consciousness, that field of light that is like the consciousness we feel when we pass over. It's very Christ-like. It's very much like the Kuan Yin energy of compassion and mercy and love. It's right here with us. It's dissolving the old patriarchal systems of internalized and externalized oppression. Neptune is dissolving the places inside of us that are violent towards ourselves. Neptune is dissolving that inner critic that brutalizes us because that's what happened to us when we were children. Neptune is dissolving the distorted Saturn that is scarcity consciousness that says there's not enough for everybody and therefore I got to get mine, or I'm always going to be, in poverty. It's dissolving that. And so that in its place, we don't know exactly what it will be, but what we do know is it's taking us into greater unity consciousness. And so what we know is that these old ways of being are dissolving. And so the number one rule with Neptune is surrender. There is a surrendering process. Surrender your heart. And again, when I go back to spirit or divine or God or however you want to say that, again, I've chosen to spend this time in Missouri right now to be closer in large part to my mom. And it just feels important. Not that I won't travel, but it feels important. And has little gems of wisdom. And just the other day, she just said, she'll say, God's my best friend. God has always been my best friend since I was a child. And this isn't even though she reads the Proverbs and the Psalms and she writes them out every morning. And that's poetry. That is some very deep wisdom that she is working with. Um, and and so but she'll say, God is my best friend and has always been my best friend. And when I was having a hard time, she's just like, just think about like God's holding your hand through this. And I find that to be very powerful. And I get chills saying it because when we're coming from that place of deep trust and faith, what's going to happen is that we are going to show up in the world with a softened stance. We're going to show up in the world looking for the best in the people around us. We're going to show up in the world with a healer's heart. And so even though the mind and the ego says to me, you're never going to affect change in the world with that simplistic attitude. You're giving your power away to a deity outside yourself. My spirit knows something different. And again, I don't feel this to be a religious thing per se. I feel it more to be the acknowledgement and recognition that we are a soul, we are a spirit, having this phenomenal experience in a physical body and a beautiful physical body. So that Saturn Neptune dissolution process is a big one. And again, to me, that has to do with why it is that we want to keep coming home to the heart, keep coming home to love, keep coming home to that frequency of grace and mercy and operating in the world from that perspective. I love from Indigenous Dene activist and author Pat McCabe, where she would just say, she wakes up in the morning and she says, how good can it get? Show me, universe, how good can it get? And, that we actually step outside our door in the morning with that consciousness. Um, I think that creates a beautiful world. Um, so that's me for today. There's a lot more I could speak into, but that feels like the most essential. And I've gone the whole gamut. And I hope that this has been helpful. So please, reach out. Let me know how this lands. Let me know how you're doing out there. And if you can't subscribe, if you haven't already, like it if you like it. And again, leave me some comments because I would love to have that back and forth to know how this lands, to know how you're experiencing this wild time and what's the wisdom you carry that you would like to transmit. Okay, so with all of that, sending so much love and gratitude for you to be here present with me today, for taking your time. And I hope you have a beautiful full moon and that you continue to enjoy this unfolding of this Saturn Neptune dance, which I think is phenomenal, and allow it to continue to dissolve whatever in you has been unready to receive love, has been unready to fully embrace life and lean in and lean into the gift and the blessing that life is. All right, with that, I'm going to just sign out, sending you love. And until next time, this is Tammy Brunker, Sky Woman.